This episode of the Wrong Advice podcast is powered by Harlow, the only woman-owned lighting brand for photographers, videographers, filmmakers, and content creators. Designed for those who push creative boundaries, Harlow lights are compact, powerful, and built to inspire. Harlow creates tools that stand the test of time, crafted for those who see light as an art form. Harlow believes that your light can be bold, powerful, and beautiful, and that it deserves to be seen. Visit Harlow online at www.harlow.com or follow them on Instagram at Harlow Creators. Welcome back to the Wrong Advice podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have the one and only Mr. Kevin Pineda Gould with us today. Kevin, how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Can you give a quick introduction to the listeners to who you are?
Yeah. Well, I'm a New York City-based fine art photographer, and I'm focused on street photography especially. And I explore this sort of convergence between the dreamlike and editorial / commercial photography, commercial in quotes. So, I mean, that's the easiest rundown. My background is very diverse, but for the last 2 years and a half, I've been focusing solely on street photography.
Nice. How long have you been taking pictures in general? As your job?
Oh, okay. So definitely I picked up a camera, I think late 2020. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so COVID had a lot to do with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So talk to me through the process. I have a very similar experience. I mean, I lost my job during COVID and bought my first real camera. And was it similar for you?
Yeah, I'll try to recap. Let me think. Okay, so I think it's not because I lost my job. Actually, I was very busy during the pandemic.
Oh, nice.
Because I was probably one of the only few production sound mixers that stayed in the city.
Oh.
So people were calling me left and right. And I actually got on two documentaries that were covering the COVID response in the city.
Wow.
So I was actually very busy with sound. Even more, I started in 2018, but 2020 kind of for me, yes, we got locked down, but actually during the height of the lockdowns, I was working on this documentary for 1 week. We were going to the Javits Center, to the Comfort, Lenox Hill Hospital, and really just COVID was still an unknown at that point. We didn't really know what was going on, so it was a bit of an adventure. I like adventure. That said, a little nervous. It was kind of ridiculous what I would do every day. It's I'd come home, back to the apartment, strip, put everything in the washing machine, take a shower before I said hello to Simi.
Remember we used to wipe down the groceries, remember that?
Yes, that made no sense.
Crazy.
Groceries, cereal box, anything you name it had to be clean. I think that was also, there was a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
It's trauma in a way that there were so many people dying. We have a very different understanding from today's perspective, but living that moment at that time, it was very intense.
Scary.
It was scary. You were separated from your family. My parents are in Mexico, so there was no chance of seeing them. In hindsight, that's great that they're there because there were the States did some crazy things with people. But it was scary. People were dying. Sirens were going off 24 hours a day. And the Empire State, we could see it from our window, even though we're in Brooklyn, and it was always pulsing red the entire time. So I think it was just psychologically, we were subjected to a huge amount of stress.
Yeah.
And I think out of that trauma, or also your everyday, everything you have in baggage from your entire life, but this exponential compression of trauma during COVID, released or opened these creative latches that I had closed. My background is actually in music and as a creative interpreter and composer, but I sort of sealed away my creativity a little bit because I began my journey in New York City in 2018 as a fully production sound mixer, so just technical post-production and on location. So I think that pause, those lockdowns allowed me to sort of I started tinkering with music again, had this analog synth around the house. I started making a few music pieces again because I needed to, but it was the strangest thing. I have no idea at what time I just picked up a camera, and it wasn't even my camera. I didn't own a camera. It was Simi's. She had a Fuji X100S.
Nice.
And form factor, point and shoot, 35 millimeter. Picked up the Fuji. And I can't remember. I do remember the first photograph that I took that I sort of still keep on my old Instagram account, which I don't use as much, as sort of the first one that strangely I captured this sign that said this must be the place and this girl. And, I started shooting a lot in the street just because there was this like compulsion and something was just telling me like shoot.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked the results I was getting. I think I felt like, oh, like you have talent, you have an eye, or like, hey, what you're getting is sort of like nice. It spoke to me, so I started exploring that, but I never even knew about street photography or about photography in general. It was really just this sort of like self-discovery, and I think about it sort of like when you're writing music. It's a process that kind of stays in your head a lot. So you might write notes down, you might create notes, but ultimately this piece is living in your head, and there's no way to really show it to people except through a piece of music.
Right.
But that's more complicated to get people to understand who you are as a person through notes, through sound. It takes a lot more skillful, trained ear and people in general to recognize complexity in music and patterns. Whereas visual is a lot more easier to digest within, if you compare it to music. So these processes that I was doing in my mind with music, all of a sudden I realized like, hey, like I'm creating a visual footprint of what I'm experiencing internally, but it's in a visual medium. Whatever I'm feeling from those moments that I was capturing, they were coming out in the photographs. So I was like, well, this is very cool but I still wasn't thinking about it that way. It's just that's what was happening. I just discovered a new medium for expression.
Ooh, I love that.
That I had never found before. And of course I already knew how to use a camera, but it's just like I had never had the emotion or the intention or this sort of like affair, obsessiveness, compulsion to shoot that way. And I think that was enabled because of the lockdowns and the pause that just sort of also let us be free a little bit.
It's an interesting take, it's like the conundrum of being locked down,
right,
and having like this sense of freedom creatively. That's an interesting duality.
I think so because, even it was a strange time, and I don't know were you in the city?
I was in Jersey, yeah.
Okay, so you remember we had like riots and we had marches.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And I wasn't part of the riots, but I was in those moments.
Yeah.
And
camera in hand.
No. I hadn't made the connection. Now I look back and I see all the people who actually were already sort of working in photography or were photographers. They were, of course, documenting everything.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. But the cool thing is like I was actually living it. I may have very different thoughts on that moment today, but there was this very cool aspect of like owning the streets back in 2020. Set aside everything political. It was meeting people and being part of a mass that sort of like took over streets, and you really felt like the streets were yours.
Yeah.
Was a very sort of empowering and liberating sensation. And I think especially because we had been locked down, even though like I feel like I cheated lockdown a little bit because I was working and I got to see things that maybe a lot of people didn't see. But that was an outpour that people wanted to be connected once again. So experiencing that, I think it also felt a little bit like, I'd only been here 2 years in New York City. So it was also like city for me had been very cool up to then. And then all of a sudden, like you're walking or riding your bike across the Brooklyn Bridge, like literally, or just like in where the cars should be, but there are no cars and it's just people all over the streets and kind of just having fun and being a little wild. That was kind of like, I think did a lot to me as well, and probably anyone who lived in that moment in the city at that time and was part of that phenomenon. There was a lot of sort of like freedom to experience in that.
Yeah.
I'm also a very like anti I don't know how you say it. Like, just I've always been outside the system a little bit. Like, I don't like to conform to rules or to what the norm is. I had a lot of problem with that, like in school, because I always wanted to try things my own way, and especially in music, there's this like very specific way as a pianist.
Yeah.
Like, well, you have to go through this line of composers and play their music before
Right.
you can get to these other composers and understand it. But I had been exposed to music from a very young age, so I had musical knowledge, and my teachers sort of, there was one that would like let me explore certain things that were more advanced, but all the rest of the academics, they were like always like poo poo and be like, he's not ready to play this and kind of stuff. And I always thought like that to me was when somebody told me like, you're not ready for this, or you don't understand this, or you're doing this wrong. I had a lot of conflict with that, because I also had this like composer side in me, and I was like, well, if I write a piece of music and somebody makes a mistake, they might make it better, because a lot of the times when you're writing music, you make a mistake and you're like, ooh, that's more interesting.
Yeah.
What
It's
I was
open for
thinking,
interpretation.
exactly. So when I was interpreting, I was like, I'm not a robot. Like, and I think it's like, I had listened to like, if I'm playing one piece, I had already heard maybe 8 different interpretations by famous or great pianists of the same piece, and it sounds incredibly different. Why am I not allowed to do something as well? So it was, people just felt like, you're out of place.
Yeah.
You're going, you got to wait for that. You have to develop the technique. You have to go through this whole thing. And I had a real conflict with people because of that, because I felt that it was, you were killing creativity.
Yeah.
And somehow I got through it, but then I ended up moving cities, and I went to a different state to study. I wanted to study music composition with new technologies and computers, so computer music basically. And unfortunately, like I moved my entire, like I got an apartment and I was ready to go, and then that didn't open. They shut it down.
Oh man.
And they're like, well, you can go into the like traditional conservatory here, and I was like, and I did that. But I've always sort of like, I feel school is terrible for creativity.
I totally agree.
And I think you learn so much more by just living life and experiencing things. So everything, all these battles I had at school, I was always looking for solutions outside of it. And I did go through, I finished college and got the degree that my mom wanted me to get, but like, I feel it's useless.
Same.
But it's like, that was also like an experience of like, okay, you had to put up with this bureaucracy and this black hole of creativity. You put up with that, but then I was still creative on the side and managed to build things on the outside. So I think it's all valid experiences. But looking back, I feel like school is kind of like, unless you have like an inspirational figure, teacher, because that's sometimes like when I talk to people and they're like, oh, I had like a teacher that really made an impact on me. And I feel like maybe there were a couple, but I never had a figure that was sort of like
Your champion.
exactly, and sort of that was really more like, I think because also my calling wasn't music. I think I've always been a visual person, and all the music I was writing at the time for electronic sound, acousmatic, like computer music, spatialized stuff, it was always very visual. And my most successful piece was one titled Event Horizon, which was like this journey towards a black hole. So it was this like 14-minute piece, and I did it for like multi-channel systems. And it was really like this journey that gets so intense because you're getting spaghettified at the end.
Yeah.
And it's the point of no return and everything like that. So, but it was always like, in my mind, it was always like, I'm in a little capsule going to a black hole, and I'm just trying to make music from that. So I was very visual, but I think the failure of some of my teachers was not saying like, hey, have you ever thought of like painting or like a visual medium? Because I think someone with more an ability to see things in people would have seen, I was meant to be more in a visual space. And I didn't have that. So that was sort of discovered here in New York City by picking up the camera by chance, and just because of everything we had been through with COVID, and as a person, everything I had been through in life, it was the right moment.
Yeah.
I had the maturity to then understand, to be able to question who I was and dive further into who I was through photography. That's what I think is the most amazing thing that photography did for me was this journey of self-discovery that
Oh.
I was a very different person before. It's so funny how that happens. I don't know what it is about photography, but if you really give yourself to it, the more you do it, it's really
cathartic.
It is. It's cathartic.
I relate to that tremendously. It's one of those things where it's like I found it in a very similar time frame during COVID as well. And it's like the relationship I have with it now is very much like, you know, I say a lot on this podcast, like it saved my life. Like it gave me a purpose when in the middle of a pandemic, there was nothing to do.
Right.
There was nowhere to go. There was nothing I could change to fix my surroundings and the experiences that I was having.
Yeah.
It gave me something to do. It gave me a place to go, and it gave me something to rely on to like fill the time. And it like gave me a purpose. And I think without it, like, I don't know, we probably wouldn't even be sitting here having this. Actually, I know we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. Yeah. And I think that's really remarkable. Talk me through your journey post picking up the camera for the first time. Obviously, you've had tremendous success both creatively, defining your own style and creating work that speaks very much to Kevin and the way that you view light. I'm very curious if that was evident early on in your photography process or something that developed over time.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, it was all new. So I never set out to, let alone make a book, that's for sure. I never really set out to do anything specific other than there was pure joy of going out and walking, exploring, the sense of adventure. Also, like late 2020, early 2021, the streets were still empty.
Yeah.
So you really felt connected to just spaces. And the sense of isolation, I loved it because you can never be alone in the city.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you'd be walking in these streets and it's just you. And it's like haunting, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's wild.
And so I think I was just loving, the camera was an excuse at first to just go out. Mm-hmm. And I was having fun. And I wasn't necessarily documenting, the city after COVID, because that's not how my brain thought at all. I was just like exploring, and the camera was my companion. But you know, I can't really nail it when there was like a small change. It's really hard to identify. It's just something that I did every day for hours. Mm-hmm. Every day I would go out and another 4 or 6 hours out in the street, come back, I would look at things, I would share things. And the whole light and shadow especially, I don't know, it's just like there's just, well, the thing is, like, I was shooting with this Fuji, and I don't know at what point I started seeing the potential of black and white. It spoke to me a lot louder than color. And I did start shooting only in the monochrome profile on the Fuji, with the 100S. And it had this very dreamlike feel, like the camera itself. Later I upgraded to the 5 X100V, or whatever, V, I guess, or 5. And it was a bigger sensor, and it wasn't as dreamy.
Oh.
And I had sold the S because this is how I thought. New cameras, they're better.
Right.
And the S had like a 12 megapixel sensor, and then the V had like a 26 megapixel, but same lens supposedly. And
it lost that
softness, that dreaminess that probably a smaller sensor was benefiting. But I still pursued it within that, and I think it's just something that's like in your DNA, where the contrast, the battle between light and shadow sort of captivated me. And now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit to now. When I look back, I feel there's this very beautiful, the reason I call the book Discovering Light is because there's many reasons, but this idea of light being bright, positivity, a way forward, something of meaning, legacy, whatever, and shadows being darkness, misalignment, negativity, the bad side of obsessiveness, compulsion, jealousy, whatever. Kind of like those stories live in the contrast of light and shadow. Mm-hmm. And I think like the oldest story in the books is like life and death. And I feel that that's what light and shadow is. It's like you see subjects in the light, there's life in the light, and then in shadows there's death or there's mystery. So I've always been attracted to black and white. I think that maybe the missing missing piece to this puzzle is I was exposed to film at an incredibly young age, like 6.
Awesome.
My uncle here, who lives in New York City, he's a jazz drummer, and we would visit him 3-4 days at a time every other year. So I was here when I was 6, when I was 9, maybe when I was 11. Anyhow, at 6, he put on Eraserhead
At
on
6?
Laserdisc, yes. And like, do I remember it? No, I remember some scenes, but like, that's still so. The way I can interpret it now, looking back, I'm also native bilingual. So, I grew up in Mexico, so everybody speaks Spanish in the world. But then at the house, my mom and my grandma would speak only English. So you learn both languages seamlessly, without much thought. You learn both languages seamlessly. Your wires get a little bit crossed, but you don't have to make an effort to learn either language.
That's so interesting.
So I feel like something similar happened to me with film, where I was exposed to cinematography. Because the thing is, like, I was also very lucky because I had a brother who's 4 years older than me, and he was super into film. So I would always he would find cool music, cool movies, and it would trickle down to me.
Right.
Or like I'd be exposed to things. So I think, well, I know that I sort of developed the same way as a language, unintentionally, cinematography through film, because maybe like there's all these films, like also like you can, the older you get, you rewatch them and you're like, I never understood this movie, like what it really means. There, especially when you're in art cinema and film, real films, that there are artists behind the making of it. There's so much depth to why they're making these movies, and you don't understand it until you're of a certain maturity.
Sure. Or like I like to say, like when you're ready to understand it helps too.
Yeah.
Because like I watch every movie. Like literally, I see everything. And similarly, we rewatch something and I'll be like, oh, like I totally missed this.
Right.
And it could have just been because I was blind to it or I was not like old enough to realize it. But also sometimes it's the 5th, 6th watch where I'm like, oh shit, I didn't.
Like life experiences will teach you life, and then you realize this is what the author that's why he put it in the movie.
Yeah.
So once you have lived experience, you start understanding cinema in a very different way.
Totally.
That said, the visual aspect of it, I was very fortunate to be exposed to just beautiful. So when people normally ask me like, what photographers influence you? I'm like, that's not it. It's what cinematographers. So it's like literally like the best cinematographers of the 20th century have been a huge influence on me. And I would definitely say Eraserhead and like Sven Nykvist, who's like the Ingmar Bergman cinematographer, Hour of the Wolf and that kind of stuff. It's just like those are films that you watch and they're incredibly beautiful, black and white. Did I ever think that way? Like, no, but it was just
ingrained.
This aesthetic, of I sort of went to film school without going to film school by watching so many films. And then I ended up working on film sets for 6 years when I moved here. And I had been working a little bit in Mexico too. So then I got to experience the craft of it, like literally from a sound perspective, but with the whole baggage of having seen a lot of cinema. So also that's a double-edged sword, because then you'd be on some shoots and you'd be like, well, I'm just waiting for that paycheck, because it's like it's not really inspiring what you're working on. But going back to the black and white, I think there was just this, the things I love about black and white. The thing is, like, I didn't understand it then, but I was just doing it obsessively and compulsively. And I think there's not really, I think the moment, let's see, definitely the moment, there were a few moments that maybe had an impact on me looking at what I was doing. Because the thing is, when you're doing something, you're just doing it.
Yeah.
I never thought like, I want to be in a museum, I want to make a book, I wasn't thinking, it was just for the love of doing the craft. Mm-hmm. And the first sort of time that someone noticed my work was Peak Design in 2023.
Oh, sweet.
In a way, because I was shooting so much, and I hate straps and stuff like that, and I hate wearing a big backpack, and I was really just shooting with one lens, even though by that time I had a Canon R5, and because I was also doing a little work of photography So I needed to have like a workhorse
Yeah.
workhorse camera, but still a camera that let me have some fun. But I was shooting with mainly a 35. So I just wanted something that I could stick it in quick. And so I thought, oh, maybe a sling bag. And I knew about Peak Design, and I walked in, and they had photographs on the wall. And I think at that point I started feeling like, hey, like some of my work, I like it. Like I think it'd be nice if other people saw it. And I was exploring Instagram a little bit. I think Instagram is also part of my journey. The moment I started sharing stuff, and then people started also responding to it, I think that was also, so there were these signs,
Reinforcements.
but then also that make you think like, how far can I take this?
Yeah.
So I think in early 2023, I probably had like 200 followers or 500 followers, or
Wow.
not more than 900, definitely, because I remember 900 very clearly, because that's when I had like the first Peak Design show. And so I walked into the store, and they had these photos on the wall. Then again, it's like I had never printed anything, I had never framed anything. That whole printing and photography was a foreign agent to me. And I just asked the store manager at the time, like, how do you get on the wall? Because I thought, like, I have some cool stuff that I want to share.
Yeah.
She said, oh, there's a QR code, and you can do like you do a proposal, and we'll, if we like it, we'll get back to you. And I was feeling inspired. I bought the sling bag, and that's the same bag I have today, and it did exactly what I needed to do back then. And I forgot about that, and it was like a month and a half later, or 2 months, that out of the blue I get an email. Hey Kevin, we love your stuff. Could you put stuff up next week? And I was like, what? Like, I'd totally forgotten, but I was, of course, like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do we do that? And like, just send me the files, and like, we'll print them for you, and like frame them. Like this is something that I would never do today. Like, it's like, no, I'm going to handle the printing and the framing, or like, how can we work out, like, is there a budget, or can we do something? I was just like, sure, I'll send you my photographs, and, because I didn't know any better, but I was just excited.
It's a huge opportunity.
And that was like the first moment of that I had like actual validation externally, without me asking for it either. Well, I did make a proposal, but it's like somebody opened the doors.
Yeah.
And strangely, that chapter led to Leica. And that's, I think, like another huge moment in my career. Because Kieran, she at the time was VP of Leica, and I had met her at Photoville that year.
Got it.
And so we connected, and by that time, I didn't really know Leica, to be honest. Like, yes, like they do optics. That's what I knew about Leica. But there was this black and white camera, the M11 monochrome. And I was telling her I love like black and white photography, and you should try out this camera. So I just loaned it for like an hour, literally, under the bridge, Photoville, and walked around, took some pictures, had my SD card. By that time, I must say, I was exploring black and white fully on my Canon for like maybe 3-4 months that I was only doing black and white. So I did a few like random shots on the piers, like whatever. I was really just having fun. But the mechanics of the camera sort of revolutionized my way of thinking about photography. Because I had never seen through a rangefinder, and I had never seen that focus system.
Yeah.
So at first, no one told me. So I pick up a camera and like, how do you focus? And I'm like, oh, you got to like align this. I'm like, that's very cool. And then it's like, okay, it's all manual. And then there's only like ISO, shutter, and that's it. The aperture's on the lens. I'm like, okay, like this is like back to basics. But there is a screen. But it was just like the tactile experience of taking photographs with that camera, kind of like, because when I returned that camera, I also told her, I'm going to have to get this camera somehow. And she probably didn't believe me at the time. Or like, well, it's not that she didn't believe me. Everybody probably says that to her,
Yeah.
I was so impressed by the camera that I started to try to emulate that on the Canon. But, focus by wire. It's not that. Or even the more expensive lenses, it's not by wire, but you don't have measurements.
Yeah.
So I started explaining like, Voigtlander.
It goes infinity.
Exactly. So started exploring like Voigtlander lenses, because they were more accessible price-wise, and doing zone focusing, getting into that, and then realizing the importance of zone focusing for street photography. So just the experience of the camera gave me, and I was at this crucial moment with black and white where I was pushing the camera. I really was already like trying to develop a style, and I think the camera was sort of limiting me to like what I would see in terms of dynamic range or just the optics. The camera wasn't, I couldn't really push the image that far without it falling apart. Or and so when I took the files back from the Leica and I ran them in Lightroom and I pulled like shadows or contrast or blacks, and I saw the impact on the image, I was like, can we curse here now?
Yeah, fuck yeah. You're like, shit.
I was like, holy shit. Like,
no, you're like, this is going to ruin my bank account.
like, what the fuck? Like it was like so precise.
Yeah.
So shadows were true shadows that were getting pulled. Highlights were true highlights. The blacks were doing, like, it was just pure separation of data.
Absolutely.
Whereas the Canon, sometimes it would do that, but like it would pull other things. Like you pull shadows, it's pulling down highlights also. Like, I mean, everything like maybe does a little bit of that, but when you're shooting, especially exposing for the certain effect that you want, and then taking it to post to just like tinker contrast or shadows or blacks or highlights or curve, the response of the files was impressive.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like I really couldn't afford that camera or like didn't think of like, oh, like this is just out of my reach. And I was still thinking like, oh, you know, making the Canon work. But then we had there was a different art show I went to, and Kieran was there. And by that point, she saw that I had the Peak design, circling back to why Peak and Leica. So I think they had collaborated on like a tripod, Leica and nice. Peak design or something. So, she saw my show on social that I was sharing, like, hey, like featured artist by Peak Design on the wall, and like super proud doing a photo walk and this kind of stuff. And she was like, hey, congrats on the Peak Design show. Like, that's very cool. Like, who did you talk to there? And I said, and she didn't know them, but it's like, oh, like, because we did like a tripod. I think that's what she said. And then she out of the blue said, like, how would you like to shoot with the monochrome for 3 weeks? And I was like, just like, holy shit. Like, I was like, of course, like that, for me, that was like a dream.
Yeah.
And of course, after that period of 3 weeks, I was able to be so prolific with photography because the camera was really mimicking what I was seeing, and I understood how to use it. And it was like the next step that I needed in terms of, I call it a paintbrush, you know, because it's the optics and it's the sensor, and it's a tool that was doing the job that sort of my vision wanted. And it was doing it kind of easily, where all I have to do is, of course, find the moment and the light that's the best light, but then it captures it. And then the edit is just cherry on top, to push it a little further. But I was able to be very prolific in the sense of like, I was just shooting cool, what I thought maybe interesting, cool shots that I was proud of every day. Yeah. I would come back every day with not 1, but 10 shots. Or at the very least, you would come back with one like really cool shot. But I never came home without a good shot. Or that one that I was proud of. Or like, so I was like, damn, like,
this is
like,
my tool.
This is my tool. Like, I connect with this camera. And also, there's something also then I started like reading a little bit about it, like educating myself a little bit on like the history. And then you start seeing like everybody who's shot with this sort of system. And obviously the price tag at first when I got the camera for free for 3 weeks, it's also like kind of like nervous handling it because it's so expensive. And it was also kind of like empowering to shoot with such a small camera that was so expensive and like a very niche particular piece of optics,
Yeah, for sure.
So that also gave me a bit of boldness
and
confidence like in the street to just have fun. And then I noticed also people weren't reacting to me in a similar way as with like a bigger camera.
Sure, because it's a little bit more innocuous.
Exactly. Or like if you just pull up your camera, take a picture of someone and smile, like it's such a small footprint.
Yeah.
People are like
disarmed by it.
Yeah. Whereas if you pull up a big lens, they're like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Yeah. So all those things connected, and I was just like, at that point, I was just feeling something. And this is way before I had any material for the book. So this was 2023.
Okay.
So there was just something that told me, like, if you want to, like, this is the next piece of the puzzle if you want to keep going further, or like this is the key to the next door
Ooh,
to open up, like getting this camera.
Yeah.
Because it truly connects with the work you want to do. And I just like bit the bullet, and we did do like a marketing arrangement where, like, obviously these 3 weeks, then I had a feature and I gave them images and they shared it. So then they offered me like a pretty good discount on buying the camera and lens, which I would never get that discount any other way.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm never ever gonna get an offer like this, and I'm just like, I finally decided, but it was like this thing, like, do I really want to just do black and white? Because this is just committing to black and white.
Huge investment.
Yeah, and I was just like chewing over it, but there wasn't much time to really chew over it, like a couple of days, and I was just like, all right, I'm going to do it. I tried to use my credit card. It bounced because my bank was like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah,
so I had to call my bank and be like, oh, like,
this is me.
This is me. I'm trying to, and then like, okay. And actually I was like, I think I had to ask, like, can you raise my credit? Because I think I also didn't have enough, on this card, especially. I built my credit here since 2018. I had
no foot. I
didn't have my footprint here before that. So it's been, it's been kind of a wild journey too. And then to put that amount of money on a credit card, was a wild experience.
Yeah.
But like, I think, like, if you're not bold in life, if you don't believe in yourself, and if you don't push yourself, I think that was one of those moments where it's like, I really pushed myself hard, financially as well. Like, I stressed my finances for the next year and a half.
Yeah.
To be paying rent, food, utilities, everything, plus like a camera. So I put it on a monthly payment on my credit card.
I fucking love. Wait, you just said something crucially important. I think needs to be reiterated. If you don't go for something when you have an opportunity or an inkling that this could be something that could be transformative for your life or your career, you may never get that opportunity again. I'm curious what the moment felt like when that package got delivered to your apartment. What was that like?
It was nerve-wracking as hell, because I remember the exact date it got delivered. It was September 25th. 2023, because my mom was in town because her uncle had passed, but like about a year earlier, or 2 years maybe, and he was gonna have I'm not sure what role he had, somehow in the military, that he had a burial at Arlington.
Oh wow.
Cemetery.
Yeah.
In where is it, in Virginia? Yeah,
Washington,
right.
Yeah.
It's Washington.
Yeah.
Okay. So she came, and we were all gonna drive down to Arlington to have this, like, an experience that also I won't forget. It was such a wild experience, but I'll get to that in a second. But always the mystery, with the packages, like sending this very expensive equipment. I think I got a heads up when it was coming. Not really, and we postponed the trip one day because there was also terrible weather, but like because the camera hadn't arrived.
Yeah.
And I think the camera weirdly arrived on a Saturday. And I was like, we can't go to Arlington and like the camera just sits in the package room or in the lobby. Like, no way, no way. So it was very nerve-wracking because we also had to like
leave.
We had lodgings there and we had to go. And the ceremony, I think, was Monday morning. So we were going to leave on Friday, but then I think we ended up pushing back, and I think we left Sunday morning early. So I got the camera on Saturday. I set up my camera and I unboxed it and I recorded that. I didn't take a picture at all until the ceremony, because basically I felt like it was such a special moment that I didn't want to like click the shutter. My first click had to be something meaningful.
I love that.
It had been such an expense for me. And then I just had it with me. So I had it for like 2 days before pressing the shutter.
That's insane.
And yeah, really. And so then the whole Arlington experience was mind-blowing because I had never experienced anything like that. And then they did like the rifle salute, and seeing all the like urns, and like the layout of the place was like wild, and you get escorted around it, and it just feels like I'm not a fan of like army or violence or war, but there's something so somber and beautiful about well-organized machine and and that's sort of how it felt there. Like it was this well-oiled military happening.
Industrial complex, yeah.
Like it was just sort of like so orchestrated. It was powerful.
Yeah.
Like it was, I was like, what did my uncle do? Like, well, what, is this normal? Like, or like,
No.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and then the thing that really struck me was like they shot the rifles and then they give you the casings of the shots.
Oh, wow.
And so they just give them to you and they're warm still from firing.
Oh, wow.
And they give them to you and it's just like, you take them with you. And I was like, it's so violent, but it's beautiful because it's a way of remembering the day, you know? And anyhow, those were my first clicks. The whole sort of burial of the urn of my uncle.
I'm willing to wager you're the only person who's ever bought a Leica camera that waited 2 days to shoot it. I'm fairly confident in that statement, right?
But I don't know. I mean, maybe, but you know, it was that special for me.
I think that speaks heavily into like the intention that you bring to your work that I think ultimately is what sets you apart from a photography perspective. A lot of times people don't have that mindset when they create because the barrier to entry is I just press the button.
Right.
I go to a place and I just press the button.
Right.
And I know until I started shooting street photography on film, I know I was just spraying and praying.
Okay.
And that intentionality didn't come to me till I started shooting on a disposable, medium like film because I only had 36 shots or 12 if I'm shooting on my Hasselblad to get it. And I think that's particularly why I find your work so powerful and moving.
Thanks.
Shortly after you get the camera, talk to me about the genesis for the book and how that process sort of unfold. And do you have in mind like maybe the first photo that you took and digested when you got back to your apartment and you were like, oh, this could end up in a book?
No? It wasn't that way. And when I look back, I think that was a great advantage I had. Ooh. And I think this came up, and I discovered this at the book talk last week. I had never thought of it that way, where it's like, this is the first time I'll never have the experience of making a first book ever again.
Yeah.
And as I was talking that night, it dawned on me. I had never realized that. And it's because I never set out to make a book in the first place. So there was never a thought at all of like this photo can be in a book, this photo can be in a wall. It just wasn't about that. I think it was so personal. The work was connecting on Instagram with people. And my journey, I think, was inspiring others. So that was sort of like the fuel. It was just posting and sharing. And I started doing reels. And also, I will say, I'll just put it out there. Like, I bought the Leica. Also, that wasn't like just, it was like the right tool for the job. But having the camera for 3 weeks, I noticed how people reacted to the camera.
Ooh.
So there's also a seductiveness of the equipment. So I forgot about this. This was like in my judgments of like a business or trying to build something. I was like, this camera is going to work for me too. So instead of me spending money on paying Instagram or Meta for ads to get visibility, I bought a $10,000 camera and started showing it on Reels. So people, because that's what happened with the three week period I had the camera. That was my first viral reel that went really viral.
How many views do you remember?
Oh, like 4 million.
Holy shit!
And like 220,000 likes, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was like there I shot from 900 followers to 12,000. From 900 followers to 12,000 from one reel.
Awesome.
So it was a super explosion. And so this is very important. But that's what I forgot to say. Like part of the you have to reason with yourself and battle yourself. Why am I spending this much money? So I said, I've never paid for ads on Instagram. I did before I had a Leica, but like the whole point, and not much, but like the whole point was like the camera is going to be my marketing tool as well.
Oh, I love that.
So I start, and people fetishize gear, and I am not a gear person. Of course, like it's a beautiful piece of like a beautiful crafted machine, but people fetishize it, and people love seeing that stuff on Instagram. So I started putting the camera in the reels, and of course I'll get a lot of hate too because people, that's how you shoot, and you buy a Leica, and that's how you're using it.
Yeah.
You shoot one hand. It's like whatever. You're like, engaging on my reel, and that's blowing up my metrics.
Yeah, right.
So thank you. But it's like that was like a calculated move that gave me peace at spending that money, because I felt like this camera is going to give me the eyes on social media.
I like that. I've never thought about it in that way. I like that a lot.
But hey, you have to make us. It's not like I didn't buy it to grow on Instagram.
No.
But I did realize through the 3-week experience, and I shared this reel not because of that. That's how I discovered it. I just said, like, shooting with the Leica M11 monochrome is a dream. Like, every shutter press is like so meaningful and intentional. It was just like I was really like in the feels because I was in this moment, and I never thought that I would say it's sort of like a crappy video, but it just like blew up, and I was like, whoa. My journey was tied to Instagram.
Yeah.
Somewhat. So there wasn't an intention of making a book because I was already publishing online.
Yeah.
So I was, and then I also was posting daily, and I started understanding more about social media. I educated myself just through using it, how the algorithm works and what it favors. And then I said, like, can I post every day forever? Like, can I do that? And I think I posted 9 months daily.
Wow.
With a mixture of posts and reels and stories and carousels and everything, until I seriously burned out. And I think I took a pause like 2-3 weeks. I was still shooting, but not posting.
Good for you.
But it was 9 months. I think I did 9 months. And so I took that account from 900 followers to about, I think it was like around 70 or 80 in 9 months, something like that.
That's incredible.
And then it's been a haul to now get it to like 110, because I've changed, and the more you sort of like, I've always sort of tried to curate my feed, but like there's only so much you can do in that sense. I always like raise the bar for myself. So you start posting sort of, you have less because you're like, this is not as good as others. So it's like my bar is always higher personally.
Yeah.
But I've still managed to be on like a daily post for like many months right now.
Which I find that so impressive. I struggle with that mightily. It's like the idea of like, what do I post? Like, I struggle with that.
Yeah. I think because I do use, so this ties to the book, because the reels that I was posting, so I got the Leica, I shot with the Leica first August 2023, and I bought it September 2023. So I started shooting fully with Leica September 2023 and forward. And throughout that period, up to, let's say, June 2024, oh wow, it's like, actually it's been such a short period.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it had been more than a year. I mean, it is more, but okay, so it's actually
not
pretty
quite
wild.
2 years yet. Yeah.
But so from September that I bought it, and I was already shooting a lot before, but from September to January 17th of 2025, because that's the last day I went out to shoot street. That's crazy because I've been so busy with other stuff. But I was just shooting obsessively, like 5 days a week.
That's impressive.
4 to 6 hours a day being out.
How many pairs of shoes did you go through in that time period?
Doc Martens, shout out. I've gotten 2 of these.
Yeah.
But I wear other shoes. I have obviously winter boots.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe like 5-6 pairs of boots. I like the boot because it does give like good ankle support.
Yeah.
So definitely, like, all the work in the book stems from mid 2023 to the last picture I probably took that's in there is December 2024. No, it can't be, because we sent all the files the 1st of October. So One year.
That's
so
impressive.
From September 2023, let's just say, to September 2024.
And you mentioned at your book talk that there were moments in like the final curation of the book that you were still going out and shooting.
Yeah,
and you were like, oh, I need to include that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So going back to Instagram and Reels, I was sort of journaling, not per se, but it was more of a mental, not journaling like this is what I did today. More of like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through, or like paragraphs that were just like metaphysical explorations of self,
Yeah.
like just I can't even think of one off my, like, for example, consciousness is a notion, and waking life and riding its waves is how we experience waking life. I remember that because that's in the book.
Yeah.
So that was part of a set of paragraphs that I wrote on different reels. So I did realize when I finally started making the book, and I wanted it to have text in it, and I wanted it to be like have this element of storytelling and self-reflection and sort of a stream of consciousness. I went through all my reels over the past year, and I copied all the paragraphs, and I put them all in a document, and I took out the things that I wrote that I'm like, I wrote this, like, this is really nice. This is a really nice thought. And the cool thing about that is that it all is from the time I was shooting this work. So everything that's said in those words is sort of how I was feeling
In the moment.
So that was a tool that we could use throughout the book to tie. So it's this sort of like weird thing where I did sort of like boom or flourish through Instagram. That was my digital publisher, myself. But then when I started actually thinking about the book and printed matter, it's like that blew my mind, because then I realized like I was missing out on such a beautiful experience of printed work, and making the book gave me the like the best education. Like, you cannot pay for this sort of education in school. Like, that was like extreme life experience and education. How do you even begin to flirt with
Was there
making a book?
any part of the process, like from the starting point, that felt like the hurdle or like the process was intimidating to get into? Because to me, it sounds like you have like immense resolve to that. When you put your mind to create this book, it like you went through the process, you went through it. You're lucky enough to have a partner who wanted to be involved in the process as well.
Definitely.
Was there any moments where you're like, this is too big for me to handle, or us to
No,
handle?
in all honesty, no. And I think sort of like you have to tell yourself you can do this no matter what. I think that is part of the mentality. Like, I was talking with Simi, the designer, my partner, and sort of like, if someone were, like, could I have done this book without you? I would say yes, because that's just the personality that I am. It would have been an incredibly different book.
Yeah.
But like, you have to tell yourself, yes, this book would never have happened the way it did without her.
Right.
It became a true collaboration, merging art and design. And being with her, and she's a graphic designer, visual artist, I've learned so much from the world of design that I think when the spark hit of making a book, it was like, and I had images, because that was the first thing. I think the first question when the dream started of like a book and it got serious was like, I went through 10, 15,000 photos. Wow. And I took it down to 1,500, and from there I took it down to 177. So I packed a folder of 177 photos, and I gave them to Simi on a hard drive. And I said, you go through these images, and you choose the ones you like, or that speak to you. Because I started thinking like, this has to speak beyond me.
Yeah.
I have to remove myself from the work a little bit. I want people, if something speaks to you, that's good. Because like, you're a different person. So that element of removing myself from my work, but of course, I curated the selection and gave it to her. And then I think maybe, I don't know, 3-4 days went by, and she had started putting together an InDesign, like the sheets of paper, the layout. And she did some of like beautiful pairings. And I think from those 177, I mean, maybe we had like 150 pages first. It wasn't that many images, but it was over 100 images probably. Mm-hmm. And there we trended to, I mean, the final count is 66 photographs. So that's a huge cut from 10,000, 15,000 to 66. And
were there any arguments over images? Like, I'm just like very curious about the process, because to go from 10,000 to 60 is like remarkable calling, right? Like, just like going through the process of getting down to such a small number.
Yeah.
I mean, it's less than 1%. I'm very curious.
It was 4 months of pure dedication to the book then.
Yeah.
And I was still shooting almost, I would say, at least 3 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. And I was fully dedicating myself, because at this time, I wasn't working anymore. I was just pursuing this chapter. Simi, on the other hand, working 5 days a week, freelancing. So we would work nights and weekends on this. But we never argued. We both have like different opinions, and I think like we would just sleep on it.
Yeah.
And I think it was a true, just like, hey, let's just see how we feel about this tomorrow. But her initial pairing, like the images that she pulled into spreads, into a layout, was that then I could like relook at my work through somebody else's eyes, and then think of the experience of someone experiencing a book, if this was going to be a book. I still didn't understand the feeling of a book yet, but you know, you had mentioned, we were talking earlier before the podcast about imposter syndrome. It's something that I think I've lost. Like,
wow.
I've gotten sort of rid of, because I did have it and I did feel it, but I think you will always be, because what I came to the conclusion a few weeks ago, where I think I made another reel, and I was just talking, because reels is how I share sort of my thoughts in text, and I was just saying, like, if you don't feel lost, you're not pushing yourself far enough outside of your comfort zone.
I like that.
So imposter syndrome is sort of like a barrier, because if you're telling yourself like, I don't feel, or reinterpret imposter syndrome into, you should feel lost. I'm coming from the perspective of an artist. Like, if you're exploring making art, you have to feel lost.
Ooh.
To like, because then that's sort of like a signal that you're in uncharted territory.
Oh, I like that.
No artist wants to stay and copy the work they've already done. You always want to be reinventing yourself. So imposter syndrome, what I can say when I stopped thinking about it, is because I just accepted I'm always going to feel uncomfortable wherever I am. But the work you start leaving behind also starts becoming sort of the force behind you.
Ooh.
So when you talk to people, or like, it got me to the point where I could do a book talk and then have 11 photographs on the wall, have a book, and then it's not about confidence. It's just like, let the work speak for itself. And I'm just on this journey, and I don't know where I'm going, and that's what I'm also discovering right now. Like, as I sit and doing this podcast with you, this is sort of like a beginning chapter for me of exploring different territories. And any sort of artist, it doesn't matter what medium, I think will always be looking for ways to push themselves into these uncharted territories. So the book was always uncharted territory from day one to the very end, till we got the damn book like in New York City. It was still uncharted territory, because I think until we got the unbound copies printed, which was probably in December, that moment was when I finally had a little relief, because I saw the beautiful prints, like the quality of the prints. Because I think, we were what? Like, photographer, editor, author, writer, publisher, designer, creative director, artistic director, distribution, logistics, project managing. Because if you leave, printers are like, they can do great work, they did do beautiful work, but not the best at running the project. So basically what happened, the book was initially supposed to be available in December in New York City, and in November we're like, hey, like, we're just checking the production schedule, like, how's it going? Turned into a shit show. It turns out they forgot to place the paper order.
Oh my God.
So printers only get paper every other month. So it got set back a month and a half. So my whole Kickstarter platform, and sort of the target goal I wanted, was like the holidays, to try to hit that sort of market, when people are wanting to buy gifts. And so that got thwarted, because that was supposed to be December 2nd. And then all of a sudden they sent us like a new production schedule, and they're saying January 26th. And I was like,
what the fuck?
Got on this call, and just like for 30 minutes, like fighting it out with the production manager, who, would not want to accept that they sort of dropped the ball. But it's like, all I was trying to do is like, how can we move that date?
Yeah.
So, we did get the book January 20th, which, 1 week before they had said. But that was a huge setback. And, at that point, I'm bleeding money. And I really sort of wanted the book to be out in December for the holidays. So those are just blows. So what I'm saying is, like, all the uncertainties also, until I got the unbound printed work, at least I felt like this book is going to look beautiful. Yeah. And that's the other thing why we went with this printer, because they're the only one that have an actual showroom in New York City. They're probably one of the most expensive ones also, and they only do art books. So very cool books that they make. But what that allowed us to do was pick every single aspect, from the threads to like the cover texture, to the paper, to the printing technique of the black and white imagery. So it just, every day was sort of like, well, I guess we're going to a showroom to look at samples. And it's like, okay. And the other thing I think that sort of solidified and was a huge undertaking for us also was the Kickstarter, to raise the money that ultimately ended up just covering the pure printing.
Wow.
We thought that was going to cover a little bit more, but it was just the printing of the books. So we still had to pay the full pallet shipping here, and then on top of that, all the other costs thousands of dollars in just packing materials. Because this is something that I didn't even think about.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh well, you do have to pack the book. I got some custom made boxes for the book, but of course we never had dimensions of the book, 10 by 10. So I got a box that was 10.25 by 10.25. Book turned out a little bigger, so it didn't fit in the box. So all of a sudden I had like $700 of boxes that weren't going to work.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. So anyhow, you didn't get it shipped, but like people will see the people who get it shipped, there are 2 boxes. And the one inside, which actually became like a 3D box, is because I cut it and I made it work for the book.
Nice.
But on top of that, we needed a real shipping box for the other box.
The interior,
so it's a box within a box, and box corners also, because what I realized is these are limited edition books. There's no replacing the book for anyone. Mm-hmm. So if a book arrives to you damaged in Poland, and they're like, hey, my book is damaged, I'm not Amazon.
There are no more.
There are no more. Or like you have to buy another one. And I realized that's not fair. Yeah. So we also did I invested a lot of money in just packing materials that ends up adding to thousands and thousands of dollars so that the book would arrive perfectly. And to this date, it's like everybody's always really impressed. They're like, I've never seen a book packed this way. It's really cool, and it's in perfect condition. So I feel proud about that.
You should. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of photo books. Like, I have an actual real problem. Like, I have too many, clearly, for my apartment at least. I think you've succeeded in creating something remarkably unique that marries like real intention and thought into how you guys created something, and it's truly special. I mean, like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not blowing smoke because we're friends. It's fucking awesome. And it's inspiring too, because like, as someone who hasn't really had much, maybe like a little inkling to make my own book, seeing the quality of what someone that I know is capable of creating is definitely inspired me to hopefully make my own book one day, because the idea that this labor of love exists in physical form, that I believe there's 500 copies? 550 copies in existence is really fucking cool. And, no matter how long it takes for you to sell every copy, the quality that you guys have been able to achieve is remarkable, and it needs to be celebrated, because it is a remarkably cool book.
And that would have been, as I say, like, without Simi, who has vast experience in the design world and branding and building, doing murals and doing art for office spaces. Her background is like ideal. So it's also what I think, looking back, is also Simi and Kieran are like sort of pivotal characters in my journey. And also, like, I met Simi on Tinder in 2019.
No way.
Yeah, pre-COVID. And it's just like the most random thing. And obviously we like hunkered together but I was doing something completely different. But it was Simi's camera I picked up. And, so it's just sort of serendipitous. And I think if that could speak to anything, it's just like, if you let life take you in certain directions, and you like really, I really felt love for what I was doing, and I was enjoying the doing. So if you really love that, it's like, also I'll say, I was very busy during COVID working. I had tons of works. So I had savings, and I had calculated a risk. I did a risk assessment, and I was like, how long can I go without having potentially any work? Mm-hmm. And so it was more or less 1.5 to 2 years on my savings. And I just said, fuck it. I'm gonna take this risk, because I do believe in myself. And if you fail, well, it's like you only live once, and it's also I believe that too. It's like, and also if you don't take a risk, gambling, whatever, it's like you need to be risky if you want to create something new. So I was like, okay, clock is ticking. I have a year and a half, but then again, I was getting work here and there too. So sometimes I would have better months than others. Sometimes I wouldn't be making any money and just seeing my bank account bleed. And it got drastic. It got like bloody. It was like really, I have also never experienced that kind of financial stress.
Yeah.
Because I think the longer you stay, when I arrived to New York City, I had only $2,000 in 2018. And I made my way to now. But I think I felt like I didn't have anything to lose when I moved in 2018. So there was always sort of the idea like, well, I can go back to Mexico or something like that. But I kept pushing forward. Now, when I've been building something that I really love and want to pursue, then I feel like I'm losing a lot. So then that I had never, when I was living month to month before in 2018, 2019, it was sort of like an adventure. Now it's like, it was sort of like, shit, like, I need to make this work because I'm still nowhere near where you're never going to get to where you really want to get. But it's like, I'm still very infant in my journey, so I need to make it work somehow to get to where I want to get. So now the risk of losing something is significant. And that's also just a driving force as well. And so the book became sort of like, I think also another element is New York City. Like, I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for New York City. And the lived experience, the hardship, the survival you have to go through, especially as an artist, it's sort of like you have this love-hate relationship with it. And if you are able to survive the onslaught of circumstances, you also, all your struggles become achievements. Also, it's something that I've realized.
Ooh, love that.
So it's like all the struggles we went through the past years, we did get through them. And now they're turning into achievements. Like obviously the book is my biggest achievement, but it was also never planned, and that was the beauty of it. And I think that was a way to trick the mind of like not getting creator block. And I think you had asked the question about what photographs started the book or anything, but there wasn't any. It's just I had a body of work, and it was more about what story can I tell with what images. And then when we got it to like a better place with the sequencing, and also there was a breakthrough in typography, that was a huge moment, because as I say, I always had like the vision of what the book should feel like, but it wasn't quite there. And then when Simi finally caught it and she showed me this, like the words and the typography and the yellow and the right sizing, the weight of the font and the spacing and the tones, I was like, this is so fucking cool. This is it. This is exactly it. So that was a huge moment where I was like inspired to then also take the book back, look at the sequencing, and I was still shooting and I still changed some images. But what happened is like I need to be alone to also like really get into the depths of my own creativity. So, Simi would go out with friends or something like that. I'm like, perfect. I'm going to have like, I'm alone all night, or afternoon and night, open a few beers and, put on great music, having some drinks to like enter a certain zone and looking at the book and writing and moving words around and images. So there was also this one moment, just like Simi had a breakthrough with typography. One day she came home and like, I got it. It's like, she came back and I showed her like, I moved this image here, this is here. I put this new image that I shot over here, and this ties really well with the words here. So it really became like an organism, that we built. We call it our kid, our baby, sort of in a weird way, because it was like a laboratory experiment. And we never deterred, and we always thought it was good. But also, if we look at like V1 versus V17 or 18, I don't know, I'll have to ask her how many she has. Like, also at one point we thought we had something nice, and you just laugh at yourself at like how far you were from the thing. And we didn't really share the process, but with very few, like we went to one friend's house and we showed them an early draft, and so we did share it a little bit, but not a lot. And it was just very organic, and the only deadline we had was if we wanted to get that December 2 print date, we had to deliver by October 1st.
Right.
So that became our only hard deadline, where the book, the sequencing has to be done, everything has to be done by then. Otherwise, we started, I think our earliest photograph when we were looking at books was like May. So we did May, June, July, August, September, September.
Yeah.
So what, 5 months and then 4 like really intense months of just design work
I mean,
and
listen,
sequencing.
I know I'm biased because I'm an owner of one of the copies. It is a really wonderful experience to go through. It is one of those books that I think will get a lot of use in my own collection, because it's, I mean, sitting on my coffee table, number one, where most new books sit, but it is just an experience in and of itself that I haven't had before with any other book, and you guys nailed the shit out of it.
Thank you.
You said something that was, I think, really crucially important, that kind of ties into what this whole journey has been for you, is that if you don't go for something, you're going to have a built-in regret. You're going to have a
Yeah.
built-in perception of failure. And to me, it's remarkable what you've been able to accomplish in, call it 7 short years. This career that you've built for yourself, this life that you've built for yourself, is nothing short of incredible. I don't know if you give yourself flowers or if you ever acknowledge the fact of that. Like, you've come very far in a very short period of time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not so much that. I sometimes feel it's a question of identity, and I think this was touched a little bit on the book talk. But I'm Mexican American. My mom is from the U.S. My dad is Mexican. I grew up in Mexico. I don't look Mexican. I don't necessarily whatever American is. It's like it's just like I never really fit in most places. So there's always been sort of a crisis of identity, in the sense of like, if you're 100% from somewhere and you connect with people and the culture and whatever, like, we didn't eat Mexican food at the house, and but at my aunt's house on my dad's side there was. And anyhow, what I'm trying to get at is about giving myself flowers for the achievements, yes, but at the same time, sometimes I'm just like, life is a bit of a dream, and you're just like, how am I here? Like, how did every single thing, if I start going through memories as a little kid, playing in a river in this little underdeveloped city that now has grown a lot where I grew up, to then these moments of like a book talk or making a book, it is insanity to me.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you can't comprehend
Yeah.
how you got there. Now I think I do say that in the introduction. I talk about life before New York City and after New York City. So I split it up in 2 lives, and I think that's accurate, maybe almost 3 lives, because also like I've done very different things in my career.
Yeah, different chapters.
Like I did like a semester of medical school. My dad's a doctor, so it's like that didn't work out. Then I went off to sciences. I don't know why, and I hated that. But it's like math and geometry and physics, and I was like, this is not.
Yeah.
There are mathematicians on my dad's side, and I was like, I hate it. This is boring. Like I did love astronomy, but then when I saw the reality of like
career, yeah,
like, I was like, I'm like, I'm out. And for some weird reason, I started playing the piano, and that took me into studying music. I think because my mom, like her father was a pretty incredible musician. Her brother is a pretty incredible musician. So it's just the connection to music was natural. That said, I wish someone had seen like my visual side. But so when I think about like, I spent like 10 years of my life in music. So from 19 to about 28, I was within a conservatory realm, whether it's piano or music composition. Then I broke out from that, sort of a little tied to it, but I started recording music engineering. So I was working and recording albums for like musicians that I made a deal with the conservatory where I graduated from, like, hey, let's turn this space into a space where artists can record, and we can record for cheaper than Mexico City, which is like 3 hours away, which is going to cost a lot more. It's like saying record in New York City versus, I don't know if Jersey is appropriate. Yeah, like it's appropriate to say the comparison. So I ventured into music recording, and I was doing that for about 3 years. And then a friend I had was venturing into film, starting out, and then they needed sound, and I said, I think I can do that. And so I started venturing into helping my friends on their film shoots. And that also like opened the doors into me coming to New York City fully as a production sound mixer. And that's what helped me grow initially here, from working on student shoots like for NYU students and Columbia students for like $150 for a shoot day, when you can make like $1,500 on professional sets on like advertising. What I had to do to come here without knowing anyone and grow my way through student films to then finally on an independent film that they screwed the entire crew, they didn't pay us, and we ended up suing them also. That was a 2-week shoot that then we didn't get any money. But then we sued them, and I still get like $24 every now and then like in my account from that. But on that set, I met someone who said, you should work with these guys. And that was like my entry into advertising production. And I started making like $600 a day. So that was a big jump from making like 200 to 600. And then from there, just growing and growing to making 1,300. Like sometimes it would be $1,500 for a day rate, and it was just like it was good, you know. But it was freelance, so it's like you would be very busy, then you'd have dips. But I grew, and there was a year, you know, I made good money, and then at least for me, my perspective, of course, because I was allowing me to live here, and then I was able to save up and do what I did then with street. But I didn't know that yet. But back to your point, circling about. Could I do that again? Go to somewhere where I don't know anyone and work my way up through an industry from students to like top level with celebrity talent.
Yes.
You know, could I do that again? I kind of feel like it was so physically, like lugging all my equipment on the subway.
Sucks.
Every other day. Like also physically, you know, you get older and everything hurts more. So I was doing that at, you know, started at 32 here, or turned 33 here, I think. Now I'm 39. I'm like, and then COVID, we got treated really well because they didn't want you riding the subway. So productions were paying for your Ubers everywhere.
Yeah.
And then they also got me used to that, you know, and then it's like, then it was back to the subway when all of a sudden there was more competition and all of a sudden I'm not getting called as much. Or like, hey, like you're not expensing my cars anymore or anything like that. It was just momentum. So could I do it again? I don't know. And
Yes.
looking back, it's what you say yes. I feel like sort of like, no, I probably couldn't do that again.
You wouldn't want to do it again.
You wouldn't want to do it again.
But that's what the benefit of hindsight. I think the
Exactly.
biggest, largest, most important, crucial takeaway from all of that is that when you give yourself an opportunity to live in this like open sort of mindset where you allow life to fill you up and like build for you, like just giving yourself the breath to like be saying yes to opportunities, you open yourself up to the opportunity of good things happening. And if you're like closed off and you're closed-minded and you don't have the ability to like take risks and chances, you'll never get to experience any of these awesome things that could potentially happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I think anybody who lived through the pandemic knows that it provided many people with the opportunity to really question what they want out of their lives. Yeah. Me, for sure. Clearly you as well. And it was this momentous opportunity where you get to really reframe your life.
Yeah.
And I think the beautiful thing is that you were able to take what was obviously an insane time in the world and turn it into this incredible career. It goes without question that I'm impressed with you as a person and a friend, and obviously as a photographer as well. Beyond that, I'm very, 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 very thankful that you were able to take the time out today to be on this podcast.
I appreciate it. I mean, I feel like also it's like we could go on and on and on.
Oh,
because
for sure.
It's just like, it's really hard to like, I think maybe within a few years I'll have better like, you know, I'll stick to these lines. Like this is like sort of like,
but the organicness of it is better this way.
I'm still in that period of like assimilating the process and still very within that start of a different journey.
Listen, I marvel at you. I think it's incredible what you've done. I have a really cheesy line. If you've been on my podcast, you're part of my family. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate it.
And Kevin, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I look forward to it again in the future.
Absolutely.